Good morning, everybody. This is Andrew David. This is Monday. It is February. I think we're the 19th today, right? February 18th? February 18th, 2019. This is Andrew David. I am live with the My Ecom Club Freedom Call. These calls take place, guys, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So good morning to you if you're with me on Facebook, if you're with me on live on YouTube as well. Hello, hello. Purpose of these calls, guys. Hey, Linda, good morning. Alexandria, Jerry, as you guys pop on. Eileeni on YouTube, hello. As you guys come on, the purpose of these calls, guys, is to keep you kind of focused, keep you in line, help you know what's going on. Linda, I need to chat with you. You missed our call on Friday nights. We need to get some info to you. But hello to all of you guys. The purpose of these calls, guys, really is to help you get your focus in. It is holiday today. A national holiday, and I'm honestly, guys, I'm not 100% sure what holiday it is. Is it President's Day? Is that right? Am I right in that? I know a lot of people have the day off. So if you're with us and you're with me live, then I appreciate it. I want to go over a couple of housekeeping items as always. Just kind of touch base and let you know what's going on. Guys, April 5th through the 7th, we are having our next Ecom Summit. If you were just with us in Fort Lauderdale, don't necessarily need to be with us at this one, but this is going to be in Anaheim, California. It is April 5th through the 7th, Friday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. each and every day. We're going to have a whole lot of training, a whole lot of information. It is going to be at the Anaheim Hilton. I'm 99% sure I will have that information tomorrow on the live Q&A call that Brock and I do. And then later this week, emails will start to go out. So, April 5th through the 7th, Anaheim. That's our next event, guys. And if you haven't yet, make sure that you sign up. Gonna have a special for our VIP sign-ups. Gonna have some cool stuff going on. Gonna bring in some big people. I got a couple of guys we're working with who are gonna bring in to say hello that are doing well over $1 million a month in ad spend alone. So excited to share some of that with you guys. That's April 5th through the 7th. That's our next event. May 3rd through the 5th. If you are already signed up for the special mastermind that we have with Teo, that is just for people that have attended events. So if you don't know about the special mastermind that we're having at Teo's, that's going to be May 3rd through the 5th. If you don't know what that is yet, then the only way for you to find out is to get to an event and really find some of that. So, with that said, all right, Ernesto, you don't give up and keep and finish the research. I think you're talking about what I put up there as far as my question with the Freedom Call. So I wanted to talk to you today about what you do when you've prepared, you've worked, you've launched, and then the motivation gets away. And I want to talk about a story of a guy that I saw recently that I thought was just so cool. And I don't know, a lot of you guys have probably not heard of the name Colin O'Brady. Okay, so Colin O'Brady, he's a guy, he's an American, he's 33 years old. ML Davis, hello on YouTube. Colin O'Brady, 33 years old, an American. Okay, recently he set his second world record. So just a few years ago, he set his first world record. He did the 7 summits around the world and then also hit Antarctica and the North Pole all within 1 year. So the 7 summits, what that means is that he scaled the 7 tallest mountains in the world. So Everest, Denali, and everything else. He scaled the 7 highest mountains, Kilimanjaro, all of those. 7 highest mountains in the world, all within a year, right? So this is a guy that a few years ago, when he decided he was going to do something like this, he sat down with his wife and they decided they were going to do something. He had been kind of an athlete, but had never had this kind of experience. Had been an outdoors guy, but had never done anything to this scale. He decided this is what he was going to do. So he went out and he did it. And he did the 7 summits. And then what he did this over the course of November and December this last year, he traversed Antarctica, the South Pole, and he did it alone. He traversed the South Pole, Antarctica alone, a trip of over 920 miles that took nearly 2 months, alone, unassisted, no, refueling stations. No, someone had done it before, a few months before or a few years before. There's a couple people had actually done it, but they had either help refueling. They had one guy had a kite kind of pulling him along that would help when winds were going bad and they need help carrying their sled across the snow and ice. Well, Colin O'Brady did it completely unassisted, totally alone. And at the time he was actually doing it, there was a second man that was doing it as well, a man from England who had been in the, especially the SAS from England, I believe. He was a captain in the English Army. He had logged more miles on the Antarctic coast than any other man in the world, now nearly 3,000 miles. And they were doing it at the same time. They were essentially racing to become the very first person that could do this unassisted. So his name was Colin O'Brady. He was a young man in his early 30s who had trained and prepared for months and months and months to do this trek. He was going after this world record. He was going to do it. So just think about your life. It's maybe not you traversing Antarctica. It's not you scaling Everest, but you have your own personal Everest in life, right? We all do. We all have several of them. We all have our own 7 summits. Well, Colin went and he trained in high altitude rooms, because not only is this, I don't know how many of you guys know this, but not only is the South Pole incredibly cold, and he had times when it got down to negative 80 between the wind and snow and everything else, so he had that to deal with. It's also at altitude. So the South Pole is around 9,000 feet in the air, right? 9,000 feet. That's almost 2 miles high. So along with the cold and along with the wind and along with the snow and these horrible situations, now he's at altitude. And by the way, you may not recognize this, but how many of you guys knew that Antarctica is also technically considered a desert? Because rainfall, precipitation is so low, it qualifies as a desert. And so oftentimes the amount of when they're trekking across, the only thing they have to drink is the snow that they then have to melt, that they then can drink. But with a limited amount of snow, because they're in a desert, it makes it that much more difficult. So in order to do this trek, he trained at altitude. He trained in a room that simulated. He was up in Portland. He's training in a gym. He's up there, and he trained in a room that simulated being at about 14,000 feet. And he trained with a guy who had done some other ultra and crazy and amazing things. And he had to train a lot to get his mindset right. Not only was he physically training, he knew that one of the biggest things that he was going to have to deal with was going to be the mindset. Have you guys picked up how congruent success and being able to achieve big things, how important the mindset is? So he had to learn how to do things. So he would do things where he would do push-ups where his hands were in buckets of ice. He would do wall squats with his feet in buckets of ice and have to do this work. So he would get used to working with his hands nearly frozen, and he would have to get used to this pain, physical pain, and still pushing himself through. Because here he's going to be in situations that could literally mean life or death. If he's there and he's alone and he's only got enough weight on his sled, he's got it down to the pound, how much he can carry across the ice, so it doesn't bog him down too much and it doesn't become too difficult, because it's going to exert more calories and everything else. So he's carrying this sled that's over 300 pounds. All he's got is one tent. And if one night he's out trying to set up a tent in 30, 40, 50, sometimes 80 mile an hour winds, and his hands are too cold, and he's frustrated after a 10, 12, 14-hour day of trekking, and he just lets things go because mentally he allows himself to slip, he's done. He's toast. He dies. He freezes that night. Now, you guys sitting and working on your stores, you sitting and working on your business, you're not in the same life or death situation all the time. It's not every single day that you're pushing to the point of, if I don't do this the right way, I'm going to die. But some of you guys are on this slope of kind of that slow and methodical death, as it were. How many of you guys have felt like that? Like the snow is just slowly piling up around you to where you feel almost claustrophobic, like you're not moving forward in the way that you should. Well, Colin, then, this is what he went through. And for months and months and months he trained, and at one point he traversed a part of Greenland to get himself acclimated and to test things out, right? Can you imagine testing? We talk about testing products, and we talk about testing ads, and we talk about pushing yourself. He had to traverse Greenland to test himself to get ready to traverse the South Pole and Antarctica. How hard is it what we ask you to do, what we talk to you about doing? How difficult is that? Guys, Colin O'Brady, he started in November. He started racing against Lewis Rudd, I believe is the guy's name, from England. This 920 plus mile journey across the South Pole. And he said carrying a 320 plus pound sled, 370, 320, a heavy sled behind him in the snow. He said within a couple of hours, he called his wife and he was ready to quit. He was already in tears a couple of hours into it. And she said, are you at the first waypoint already? You're already at the first spot? Because technically when they got dropped off, they weren't even at the beginning. They had a few miles to go before they even got to what could be considered the beginning, because the way the plate, the shelf, the Arctic shelf, wherever it was. So he got started before he even began. Oftentimes, guys, in your journey, you're going to have to start before you even begin. You got to start preparing yourself before you launch your first store. You got to prepare yourself before you get your ads out there. And if you've already got your ads out there and you're struggling, you need to prepare yourself now before things really get moving. And there will be moments that you want to quit, just like Colin did, just after months and months and months of preparation and work and training and money spent and getting himself all the way to the South Pole. An hour, 2 hours into it, he wanted to give up. And some of you have done that. Some of you have gotten to this point. And, I've spoken with people recently who have put months of work into something and they've decided they want to give up because it just hasn't worked right away the way they thought. Guys, that's life. That's part of the journey, right? So Colin got through it and he pushed himself. And his wife kind of kicked him in the booty and got him up and rolling. And he pushed through. Now this is something where, guys, an hour and a half to 2 hours every single morning to get your gear packed, to boil water so that you have something to drink during the day. And then 12 to 14 hours, 10, 12, 14 hours of trekking through some of the most inhospitable climate and temperature and weather on Earth, to then get to a point and have to set up a tent in those winds, in that cold, to then get more snow, to boil so that you can drink some water so that you can then sleep. And then wake up in the morning and have to get your sled out from underneath the snow and start it all over again. And he said at the beginning he was doing somewhere in the 9, 10, 12 mile an hour or 10, 12 miles a day range. That's where he began. And by the end of the trek, getting closer to the end, he was doing 18 to 25, and he was really pushing himself. He had gotten into consistently what he called getting into kind of a higher flow, a higher state. He got in the zone. He became super productive. He learned what it would take for him mentally to just allow himself to function at a higher state. And he was just present in that moment and doing it. And he said Christmas Eve came up and he was about 3 days. He was about 70, 80 miles from the finish. And he knew going the way he was going, he was about 3 days from being able to finish. And he was well in the lead of the other gentleman. But he said he woke up and he realized he didn't have quite as much food as he thought. And his supplies were running low. And if he was going to finish this, he needed to do it soon. And so he got started, and he didn't even tell. He would talk often with his wife, who was kind of his trail boss as well. He would talk with some family members, and they would kind of test him to see how he was doing. And he just kept going. And he said hour 11, hour 12 came, and typically that time that he checks in came and went, and he hadn't checked in because he had decided that he was going to push through. That the last push to the final checkpoint, 77 and a half miles ahead, he was just going to go all out and he was going to achieve it. And he wasn't going to let anything stop him. And he did. A 32-hour burst straight through. essentially an ultra marathon at the end of a 52, 54 hour or 54 day journey across the South Pole, across Antarctica. This young man ran a 32-hour continuous burst, only stopping partway in between so he could boil some water, take a quick 90-minute nap, get up and run the rest of the way through. And he finished. He became the first man to ever traverse Antarctica by himself. Now, many times throughout that, he had that feeling that he had prepared, he had worked, he had begun the journey, he had launched, and motivation was just gone, and he didn't feel like he had the will or the strength to carry on. How many of you guys have honestly felt that? Yes? How many of you guys have felt occasionally the willingness to keep yourself moving? How many of you have felt it wane? And you felt the motivation kind of seep from you. And you're wondering why you're keeping going and why you're going to go forward and why everything else is going to happen. Now, I don't know deep down. I haven't gotten into all of his stuff. I haven't gotten into why he decided that he wanted to do this. Why it was so important to him. But it was. For him, for Colin, there was a big reason behind what he was doing it. Why he was doing it. Guys, you're not scaling the 7 summits. You're not traversing the South Pole. You're not traversing Antarctica. You don't have to deal with negative 80-mile-an-hour winds, but you do sometimes deal with negativity from friends and family members. You deal with financial stress. You deal with a job that doesn't support you. You deal with friends around you that tell you you should quit and get back to work. You deal with your own frustration, mental stress. You deal with depression and anxiety and all sorts of other things. We have physical limitations, we have illnesses, we have family members that are sick. There are reasons that we do things and there are obstacles in our way. And guys, every single one of us has some reason why we haven't done more. And I promise the journey isn't over and there will be other obstacles. And there will be moments when it feels like you are scaling and ascending a peak. And you will have moments when it feels like you are coasting on the other side and things are going well and you get into the flow just like Colin did. And you were able to rock out for a while. But guys, occasionally it's going to come back and it is going to kick you in the tail and you're going to struggle with it and you're going to need some help. This is why we get into the why. This is why we talk about not just learning skills, but strengthening yourself. Because if you're willing to strengthen yourself, eventually it's going to be tested and it's what you're going to need to get to that next level. Sit down today, this week, review some of the goals that we've talked about setting. I've talked over and over and over again about, my daily tasks involve my spirit, mind, body, soul, and heart. I journal, I read, I exercise, I plan, and I find a way to spread love. These are, let me show this for YouTube too. These are things that I think are important each and every day. Guys, what are you doing each and every day for your spirit, mind, body, soul, and heart? Are you reviewing your goals each and every day? Have you sat down and thought again about why you're doing it? Have you thought about what your frustrations are and how best to attack them, how to work through them? What are you doing to strengthen yourself on a daily basis? First off, congratulations for being here. These calls, the purpose of them, hopefully each time you listen, you get just a little bit of, I can do this. That's my goal, guys. My goal is that somebody listening to every one of these calls, somebody gets something that gets them through even a few days. Occasionally, maybe a tear is shed. Occasionally, maybe something is done to get you to take action on a greater level. But at a minimum, something to get you through the next 48, 72 hours. Something to strengthen you and get moving. Hopefully, you guys get that out of these because they strengthen me. But you need to also find the little things that will strengthen you. Because they're there. And they're needed. I hope you go out and you make it an amazing day. I hope you take today and you strengthen yourself. And you do something for yourself. And you find a way to scale those summits and traverse your trials. And even if you're buried up to your waist in the snow, that you find a way to rise from the ashes and fly like the phoenix. Love you guys. Go out and make it an awesome day. We will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.